The transport ship Meridian's Edge shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, its hull groaning under the stress of emergency deceleration. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped her command chair, watching the tactical display paint a grim picture of the Kepler 442 system. Red indicators swarmed across the holographic projection like angry insects. Zephyrian battlecruisers, destroyer squadrons, and something new that made her blood run cold. "Captain, sensors are picking up massive energy signatures from the planet's surface," reported Lieutenant Chen from the science station. "It looks like they're building some kind of orbital bombardment platform." Elena's jaw tightened. Kepler 442b had been humanity's newest colony, home to nearly 2 million civilians. The Zephyrian Empire had struck without warning, cutting through the outer defense grid like tissue paper. Now, barely 48 hours later, only scattered resistance remained on the planet below. "Status on the evacuation fleet?" Helena asked, though she already knew the answer would be disappointing. "Still 6 hours out, Captain. The civilian transports can't match our speed. 6 hours. Elena stared at the tactical display, counting enemy ships. The small human fleet that had responded to the distress call was outnumbered 15-1. Even with the element of surprise, they could maybe buy the evacuees 30 minutes before being overwhelmed. "Incoming transmission from Admiral Crawford," Communications Officer Martinez announced. The weathered face of Admiral James Crawford appeared on the main screen, his expression grave. Behind him, Elena could see the bridge of the flagship Defiant bustling with activity. "Captains, our situation is clear," Crawford began without preamble. "We're outgunned, outmanned, and out of time. But those are our people down there, and I'll be damned if we abandon them. We're going to hit their main battle group hard and fast, try to draw their attention away from the planet long enough for the evacuation to complete." Elena felt a familiar knot form in her stomach. She'd served under Crawford for 8 years, and she recognized that tone. This wasn't a tactical briefing, it was a farewell speech. "Sir," came a voice from another ship's captain. "Our projected casualties are—" "I know the numbers." "Captain Morrison," Crawford interrupted. "I also know that sometimes the right thing to do isn't the smart thing to do. We knew the risks when we took these commissions." The transmission ended, leaving each ship's crew to process what they'd just heard. Elena looked around her bridge at the young faces of her crew. Most were barely out of the academy, eager and untested. They deserved better than a suicide mission. But as she opened her mouth to speak, the proximity alarms began screaming. A new contact had appeared on sensors, moving impossibly fast toward the human formation. "What is that?" Elena demanded. Lieutenant Chen's fingers flew across his console. It's small, Captain. Maybe the size of a shuttle. But it's moving at nearly 0.8 light speed in normal space. That's impossible. Nothing can maintain those velocities without—" The contact vanished from sensors only to reappear directly in front of the human fleet. Elena blinked, certain her eyes were playing tricks on her. Floating in the void of space without any visible life support or propulsion system was a child. The figure couldn't have been more than 12 years old, wearing what looked like simple civilian clothes, jeans, sneakers, and a faded t-shirt with some cartoon character on it. Long brown hair drifted around a face that seemed completely unbothered by the vacuum of space. "Are our sensors malfunctioning?" Elena whispered. "No, Captain. All systems showing green, and we're receiving a transmission." Audio only. The voice that came through the speakers was high and clear, with the unmistakable tone of a child, but there was something else underneath it. Something that made Elena's spine tingle. "Hello, everyone. My name is Alex. I know this looks really weird, but I promise I'm here to help. The bad aliens are hurting people on the planet, and that's not okay." Elena exchanged glances with her crew. This had to be some kind of Zephyrian trick, maybe a new psychological warfare tactic. But as she watched, the child, Alex, began moving toward the massive Zephyrian fleet. "Alex, this is Captain Vasquez of the Human Navy. You need to get out of there immediately. Those ships will destroy you." A sound came through the comm that Elena could only describe as a giggle. "Oh, they're going to try. But I don't think they understand what they're dealing with." On the tactical display, Elena watched in stunned silence as Alex approached the first line of Zephyrian destroyers. The alien ships immediately opened fire, lance beams and plasma torpedoes converging on the tiny figure. The space around Alex lit up like a miniature star as weapon after weapon struck their target. When the light faded, Alex was still there, completely unharmed. "Okay, that was rude." Alex's voice came through the comm, sounding genuinely annoyed. I was trying to be nice. What happened next would be burned into Elena's memory for the rest of her life. Alex raised one small hand and the lead Zephyrian destroyer simply stopped. All of its lights went out simultaneously, and the massive ship began to drift dead in space. Captain, Lieutenant Chen's voice was barely a whisper. I'm reading complete power failure across that destroyer. Every system is offline. It's like someone just turned off a switch. The Zephyrian fleet responded with predictable aggression, concentrating their fire on Alex. The child weathered the assault without even seeming to notice, then pointed at another ship. It too went dark instantly. Elena realized her mouth was hanging open. Around her bridge, her crew sat in stunned silence, watching a 12-year-old disable warships with casual gestures. This is Admiral Crawford to all ships, came the voice over the fleet comm. Are you seeing this? Before anyone could answer, Alex's voice returned, still maintaining that innocent, childlike tone. Sorry about this, but you guys are being really mean. I'm going to have to ask you to leave now. The child began moving faster, zipping between the Zephyrian ships like a hummingbird among flowers. Every vessel Alex touched went dark. No explosions, no debris, just the complete and instantaneous failure of every system. Within 10 minutes, an entire Zephyrian battle fleet hung powerless in space, their crews trapped aboard dead ships. And floating among them, looking for all the world like any ordinary kid, was humanity's most impossible savior. Elena finally found her voice. Alex, what are you? The response came with what sounded like a shy laugh. I'm just Alex, but I guess you could say I'm really, really good at fixing broken things. And right now, this whole situation looks pretty broken to me. The emergency meeting aboard the Defiant felt surreal. Admiral Crawford sat at the head of the conference table, surrounded by his ship captains, all of them stealing glances at the empty chair that should have held their most important guest. Alex had politely declined to come aboard any of the ships, preferring to float freely in space nearby. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Admiral Crawford said, rubbing his temples. A 12-year-old child just single-handedly disabled an entire Zephyrian battle fleet. No weapons, no technology we can detect, just pointed at them. Captain Morrison of the Stalwart leaned forward. Sir, our science teams have been analyzing the sensor data. The Zephyrian ships aren't just powered down, they're completely inert. It's like every molecule of their technology has been selectively deactivated while leaving their life support systems intact. That's impossible, muttered Captain Torres from the Retribution. You can't just turn off physics. Elena cleared her throat. With respect, Captain, I think we need to expand our definition of possible. I've been in contact with Alex for the past hour. The child is unusual. Unusual is putting it mildly, Crawford said. What did you learn? Elena consulted her tablet. Alex claims to be originally from Earth but won't specify when or where. The child speaks about places and events that don't exist in any historical record. When I asked about family, Alex just said they were somewhere else now and seemed sad. Could this be some kind of advanced human from the future? Morrison suggested, before anyone could respond. Alex's voice came through the ship's communication system, though no one had opened a channel. Sorry to interrupt, but you're thinking about this all wrong. I'm not from the future, and I'm definitely not some kind of super weapon. I'm just a kid who got really good at understanding how things work. Crawford stood up slowly. Alex, how are you able to hear our conversation? This is a secure channel. Oh, that's easy. Your ship is talking to my ship, which is talking to your ship, and so on. Information wants to be free, Admiral Crawford. I just helped it along a little. The silence that followed was broken by Lieutenant Chen's voice over the intercom. Admiral, we're detecting massive energy readings from the planet's surface. The Zephyrians are powering up that bombardment platform. Elena felt her heart sink. The disabled fleet in space was just the advance force. The real threat had always been the installation they were building on Kepler 442b. Alex, Elena said, addressing the air, there are still Zephyrian forces on the planet. They're preparing to destroy the remaining human settlements. I know. I can feel them hurting people down there. It makes me angry. The way Alex said those last words sent a chill through everyone in the room. There was something underneath the childish voice, something vast and patient and utterly implacable. I'm going down to the planet now, Alex continued, but I want you all to watch what happens. It's important that you understand. Admiral Crawford leaned toward his communicator. Alex, wait. We don't know what kind of defenses they have down there. It could be dangerous. A sound came through the speakers that might have been laughter, but it carried harmonics that human vocal cords could never produce. Admiral, I've been dangerous since before your son was born. The question isn't whether I can handle a few scared aliens with particle weapons. The question is whether they can handle me. On the main view screen, the image shifted to show Alex floating above the planet's surface. The child's form was tiny against the massive curve of Kepler 442b, but somehow seemed to dominate the entire view. Elena watched in fascination as Alex descended through the atmosphere. The child should have been torn apart by atmospheric friction, or crushed by pressure changes, but instead seemed to simply ignore the laws of physics entirely. The bombardment platform came into view, a massive crystalline structure, rising from the planet's largest continent like a technological mountain. Energy coursed through its framework, building toward a discharge that would sterilize every human settlement on the planet. Alex approached the structure with the casual confidence of a child walking up to examine an interesting bug. Zephyrian defenders opened fire from concealed positions, their weapons creating a light show that painted the sky in deadly colors. The energy beams passed harmlessly through Alex as if the child were made of empty air. That's interesting. Alex's voice came through the comm. They're trying to hurt me with light. That's like trying to hurt the ocean with a teaspoon. Elena realized she was holding her breath as Alex reached out and touched the bombardment platform's central spire. The massive structure, built from materials that could withstand the output of a small star, began to crumble like sand. But it wasn't destruction in any conventional sense. The platform was simply ceasing to exist, its component particles losing cohesion and drifting away like dust on a cosmic wind. Captain Vasquez. Alex's voice had changed, becoming older somehow, weighted with something that might have been sorrow. I need you to record what I'm about to tell you. It's important that your species understands. Elena activated the recording system with trembling fingers. Go ahead, Alex. My real name isn't Alex. I chose that name because it seemed friendly and I wanted you to like me. I am what your philosophers might call a cosmological constant, a force that maintains balance in the universe. When life becomes too cruel, when civilizations grow too proud, when the innocent suffer too greatly, I manifest to correct the imbalance. The view screen showed Alex floating above the disintegrating Zephyrian installation, arms spread wide like a child pretending to fly. The Zephyrian Empire has spent 3,000 years conquering and enslaving other species. They have destroyed 47 civilizations completely and reduced 112 others to servitude. They believe that might makes right, that power justifies any action. Admiral Crawford leaned forward. Are you saying you're here to destroy them? No, Admiral. I'm here to teach them. The universe has tried subtlety with the Zephyrians. It has tried natural disasters, resource scarcity, internal rebellion. They have ignored every lesson. So now the universe sends something they cannot ignore. On the surface below, the remnants of the Zephyrian occupation force were evacuating their positions, fleeing in terror from the child who unmade their greatest weapons with a touch. I don't want to hurt anyone, Alex continued, and Elena could hear genuine sadness in the voice. But sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to show them what it feels like to be small and helpless. The Zephyrians are about to learn humility. Elena found her voice. What about humanity? What about us? For a long moment, Alex was silent. When the child spoke again, the voice was warm and fond. Humanity is still learning. You make mistakes, sometimes terrible ones, but you also show compassion for strangers. You sacrifice for those weaker than yourselves, and you never stop trying to be better. That's why I'm helping you. That's why the universe isn't done with you yet. The recording light blinked steadily as Elena asked the question that had been haunting her since this began. Alex, what are you going to do to the Zephyrians? The child's form began to glow with soft light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I'm going to show them what they really are, and then I'm going to give them a choice. The evacuation ships arrived to find a scene that would be debated in universities and military academies for generations. The entire Zephyrian fleet hung motionless in space, their crews alive but trapped aboard powerless vessels. On the planet's surface, the massive bombardment platform had been reduced to a field of sparkling dust that caught the system's orange sunlight like scattered diamonds. Captain Elena, Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the Meridian's edge, watching Alex float serenely among the disabled enemy ships. The child hadn't moved in over an hour, appearing to be in some kind of trance or deep concentration. "Captain," came Lieutenant Chen's voice over the intercom. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. Admiral Hayes wants to speak with you immediately." Elena sighed. She'd been dreading this conversation. How do you explain to the highest levels of human military command that their most significant victory in the war had been achieved by a mysterious child who treated the laws of physics as friendly suggestions? The Admiral's face appeared on her personal screen, his expression grave. Behind him, Elena could see the bustling activity of Earth's Strategic Command Center. "Captain Vasquez, I've read your preliminary report 3 times and I'm still not sure I believe it. You're telling me that a single unidentified human child disabled an entire Zephyrian battle group?" "That's correct, sir. I have full sensor logs and witness statements from all crew members." Admiral Hayes rubbed his forehead. "Captain, the political implications of this are staggering. The Zephyrian Empire has been expanding for millennia. They've never been defeated, never been forced to retreat. If what you're saying is true, this child might have just changed the balance of power in the entire galaxy." Before Elena could respond, Alex's voice came through the communication system. "Sorry to interrupt, Admiral Hayes, but you're worried about the wrong things. The Zephyrians aren't your biggest problem anymore." Hayes sat bolt upright. "Who is this? How are you accessing our secure channels?" "I'm Alex. Captain Vasquez has told you about me. And I'm accessing your channels because information likes to travel, and I'm very good at helping it find where it wants to go." Elena watched as Admiral Hayes gestured frantically to someone off-screen. She could imagine the chaos in Earth Command as they tried to figure out how an unknown entity had penetrated their most secure communications. "Alex," Hayes said carefully, "what do you mean the Zephyrians aren't our biggest problem?" "The Zephyrian Empire is just one player in a much larger game, Admiral. They've been expanding aggressively because they're running from something that's been chasing them across the galaxy for the last 2,000 years. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. What's been chasing them? "The Devourers, an ancient machine intelligence that consumes entire star systems to fuel its expansion. The Zephyrians found evidence of it in the galactic core about 3 millennia ago, and have been fleeing ever since. Their conquest campaigns aren't about glory or resources, they're about staying ahead of annihilation." The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. If Alex was telling the truth, then humanity was about to find itself caught between a fallen empire and something infinitely worse. "How long do we have?" Admiral Hayes asked, his voice tight with controlled panic. "The Devourer fleets will reach this spiral arm in approximately 18 of your months. The Zephyrians were hoping to complete their evacuation preparations by then. My intervention has complicated their timeline." Elena looked out at the disabled Zephyrian ships. "You're saying we just doomed them to be caught by these Devourers?" For the first time since this conversation began, Alex sounded truly sad. "No, Captain. I'm saying I've given them an opportunity to choose a different path, and I'm hoping humanity will help them take it." The child's form began to move again, drifting toward the flagship of the Zephyrian fleet. Elena watched on the main screen as Alex approached the massive dreadnought Conquest of Stars, its darkened hull stretching over 3 kilometers from bow to stern. "What I'm about to do has never been attempted before," Alex said. "I'm going to create a bridge between species, a shared understanding that goes beyond language or culture. It will be uncomfortable for everyone involved." Elena felt a strange tingling sensation, starting at the base of her skull and spreading throughout her nervous system. Around her, the bridge crew showed signs of the same phenomenon: widened eyes, tense postures, the look of people experiencing something entirely new. Then the sensation intensified, and suddenly Elena was no longer standing on her ship's bridge. She was floating in a vast space filled with swirling colors and impossible geometries, surrounded by other figures she somehow recognized as members of both fleets. She could see Admiral Crawford, his weathered face showing wonder and fear in equal measure. Captain Morrison stood nearby, his usual skeptical expression replaced by awe. And scattered throughout the strange space were beings she had only seen in intelligence briefings: Zephyrians. They were tall, graceful creatures with crystalline skin that refracted light in mesmerizing patterns. Their large, multifaceted eyes showed intelligence, and Elena was surprised to realize fear. They looked as confused and overwhelmed as the humans. At the center of this impossible gathering stood Alex, but the child's appearance had changed. The simple clothes and youthful features remained, but there was something luminous about the figure now, as if Alex were lit from within by starlight. "Welcome to a place between minds," Alex said, and somehow every being present understood the words perfectly, regardless of their species' language. "Here deception is impossible. Here you will see each other as you truly are." Elena gasped as images flooded her consciousness. The history of the Zephyrian Empire from their perspective. She saw a proud species that had developed spaceflight, just as the first signs of the Devourer plague reached their home system. She witnessed their desperate exodus, their gradual transformation from explorers to conquerors as they were forced to seize resources and territory from other species, to stay ahead of the advancing darkness. But she also saw the cruelty that desperation had bred, the callous disregard for other life forms, the slow corruption of a species that had once valued art and philosophy above all else. At the same time, she could feel the Zephyrians experiencing human memories, Earth's bloody history, but also its moments of transcendence. They saw humans dying to save strangers, sacrificing their own comfort to help those in need, reaching across barriers of race and culture to build something better. One Zephyrian figure stepped forward, its crystalline features reflecting the strange light of this in-between place. Elena somehow knew this was Fleet Commander Crystalline Wind Through Stars, the highest-ranking officer present. "I understand now," the commander said, its thoughts translated into concepts that all could grasp. "We have become the very evil we once fled from. In our desperation to survive, we have forgotten what made us worth saving." Alex nodded, seeming very young and very old at the same time. "The Devourers were once like you, a species facing extinction that chose to consume others to preserve themselves. They have been what you are becoming for over 1,000,000 years." Elena felt the weight of that revelation settle over the gathered beings. The ultimate enemy wasn't some alien monster. It was the logical endpoint of choosing survival over morality. "But there is another path," Alex continued. "Humanity and the Zephyrian Empire can choose cooperation over conquest. Together you might find a way to stop the Devourers permanently, rather than simply running from them." Fleet Commander Crystalline Wind Through Stars turned toward Elena and Admiral Crawford. "We have committed terrible acts against your species. Why would you consider alliance with us?" Elena found herself speaking without conscious thought, her words drawn from some deep well of understanding. "Because redemption is always possible. Because the alternative is worse. And because sometimes the right thing to do isn't the smart thing to do." The strange space began to fade around them, but the understanding remained. Elena found herself back on her bridge, her crew looking around in confusion and wonder. Alex's voice came through the speakers one more time. "The choice has been offered. Now we'll see what both species choose to do with it." 3 weeks after what historians would later call the Kepler Revelation, the hastily constructed conference, Station Harmony orbited the neutral system of Wolf 359. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, human structural frameworks, supporting Zephyrian crystal matrix technology, creating something that neither species could have built alone. Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the central conference chamber, watching delegates from both species work through the complex logistics of their unprecedented alliance. The humans wore their military uniforms while the Zephyrians had donned ceremonial robes that caught and reflected light in patterns that somehow conveyed meaning. The past 3 weeks had been the most challenging of Elena's career, not because of combat or technical difficulties, but because she'd been forced to question everything she thought she knew about war, peace, and the nature of good and evil. Fleet Commander Crystalline Wind Through Stars approached her, moving with the fluid grace characteristic of its species. Since the revelation, Elena had been working closely with the commander to establish basic communication protocols, and she'd learned to read the subtle shifts in crystal coloration that conveyed Zephyrian emotions. "Captain Vasquez," the commander said, its translation device rendering the complex harmonic tones into accented but clear English. "I have received reports from our deep space monitoring stations. The Devourer advance fleets are moving faster than projected. We have perhaps 14 of your months before they reach this sector." Elena felt her stomach drop. They'd been hoping for at least 18 months to prepare defenses, establish supply lines, and coordinate their combined fleets. 4 months was a significant loss. What changed? She asked. The commander's crystalline features shifted to display what Elena had learned indicated deep concern. We believe they detected the energy signature from the child's intervention at Kepler 442. The Devourers are curious about anything that can disable our technology so completely. Before Elena could respond, a familiar voice filled the chamber, though Alex was nowhere to be seen. They're not just curious, Commander. They're afraid. Every conversation in the chamber stopped as delegates from both species looked around for the source of the voice. Elena had become accustomed to Alex's ability to communicate without being physically present, but it still unnerved the others. Alex, Elena said, addressing the air. Where have you been? We haven't heard from you since the revelation. I've been busy preparing for what's coming. The Devourers aren't just another enemy fleet, Elena. They're a philosophical crisis made manifest. Every species they've encountered has faced the same choice. Preserve your values and be consumed, or abandon your values and become like them. Admiral Crawford's voice came through the communication system from his flagship. What makes you think we can succeed where millions of other species have failed? Because this time is different. This time, former enemies have chosen to stand together rather than flee separately. That's something the Devourers have never encountered before. Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead xenobiologist on the joint research team, raised her hand tentatively. Alex, our analysis of Zephyrian historical records shows that the Devourers aren't just a military threat. They seem to corrupt the very concept of cooperation. Species that try to unite against them tend to turn on each other instead. That's correct, Dr. Chen. The Devourers emit a psychic field that amplifies fear, paranoia, and self-preservation instincts. They don't just consume matter and energy, they consume trust. Elena exchanged glances with Commander Crystalline Wind Through Stars. They'd been building a fragile alliance based on mutual understanding and shared purpose. If the enemy could turn them against each other simply by arriving in the system. However, Alex continued, and Elena could hear something like amusement in the voice. I've been working on a solution to that problem. Consider it a gift to both your species. The chamber filled with a soft, warm light that seemed to emanate from everywhere at once. Elena felt the same tingling sensation she'd experienced during the revelation, but gentler this time, more like a comfortable warmth spreading through her mind. When the light faded, Elena realized she could sense the emotions of everyone in the chamber, not intrusively, but like background music that she could tune into if she chose. She could feel Commander Crystalline Wind Through Stars' determination, mixed with deep-seated guilt over past actions. She could sense Dr. Chen's excitement at the scientific implications of their situation. Most importantly, she could feel the genuine desire for cooperation, emanating from both human and Zephyrian delegates. What did you do to us? Admiral Crawford's voice carried concern but not alarm. I've given you a partial immunity to the Devourer corruption field. You'll still be able to feel fear and self-preservation, but you'll also be able to sense the true intentions of those around you. It will be much harder for external forces to make you distrust your allies. Elena tested the new sense cautiously, focusing on Commander Crystalline Wind Through Stars. She could feel the alien's determination to make amends for its species' past actions, its genuine respect for human resilience, and beneath it all, a deep love for the art and philosophy that the Zephyrians had abandoned in their flight from the Devourers. This is remarkable, Dr. Chen said, her scientific mind racing. You've essentially created a psychic network that reinforces positive social bonds while filtering out artificial paranoia. Something like that. Though I should warn you, this connection works both ways. The humans and Zephyrians in this chamber will always be able to sense each other's true feelings. There's no hiding your emotions anymore. Elena felt a moment of panic at the thought, then realized she could sense similar concerns from others around her, followed by growing acceptance. If they were going to trust each other enough to fight together, maybe complete honesty was exactly what they needed. Fleet Commander Crystalline Wind Through Stars stepped into the center of the chamber, its crystalline features shifting to display formal resolve. In the interest of this new honesty, the commander said, I must confess something to our human allies. The Zephyrian Empire possesses weapons that we have not revealed, planet killers that we developed in desperation during our flight from the Devourers. We have hidden them because we feared you would see us as an even greater threat. Admiral Crawford's image appeared on the main screen, his expression thoughtful rather than angry. Commander, we appreciate your honesty, But given what we're facing, I think we need to discuss putting those weapons to good use. Elena could sense the surprise and relief flowing from the Zephyrian delegates. They'd expected accusations or demands, not practical military planning. Dr. Chen raised her hand again. If I may, I think we're approaching this backwards. The Devourers have been successful because they force species to choose between survival and morality. But what if we could find a third option? Explain. Alex's voice carried interest. What if we could turn their own strategy against them? The Devourers consume other species to fuel their expansion, right? What if we could find a way to feed them something that would change them instead of strengthening them? Elena felt excitement ripple through the chamber as both species considered the implications. You're suggesting we try to cure them instead of destroying them, Elena said slowly. Exactly. The Devourers were once like the Zephyrians, a species driven to extremes by desperation. If we could find a way to restore their original nature. Commander Crystalline Wind Through Stars' features shifted to display deep contemplation. It would be poetic justice. We nearly became like them. Perhaps it's time to offer them the same choice for redemption that humanity offered us. Alex's presence seemed to grow stronger in the chamber, though the child still remained invisible. That's a beautiful idea, Dr. Chen. But you should know that attempting to cure the Devourers will be far more dangerous than simply fighting them. You'll be putting your entire civilization at risk on the hope that something that has been pure evil for 1,000,000 years can still remember how to be good. Elena looked around the chamber at the faces of humans and Zephyrians united in purpose, bound together by trust and shared understanding. Then I guess we'll find out what we're really made of, she said. The research facility buried deep beneath the moon of Titan had become the most important location in human space. For 6 months, teams of human and Zephyrian scientists had worked around the clock, developing what they hoped would be the key to saving not just their own species, but potentially millions of others across the galaxy. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before a massive, holographic display showing the molecular structure of what they had. Dubbed the Restoration Virus, the name was deliberately optimistic. They were creating something designed to restore the Devourers to their original nature, rather than simply destroy them. The theoretical framework is sound, Dr. Chen explained to the assembled military leaders via quantum encrypted communication. The virus targets the specific neural modifications that the Devourers use to suppress empathy and individual thought. If successful, it should begin reversing millions of years of deliberate psychological conditioning. Admiral Crawford's image flickered slightly as the quantum encryption cycled. Dr. Chen, what you're describing sounds more like performing brain surgery on an entire species rather than deploying a weapon. That's exactly what it is, Admiral. The Devourers didn't become what they are through natural evolution. They deliberately altered themselves generation after generation to become more efficient at consuming other life forms. What we've created should theoretically reverse that process. Commander Crystalline Wind Through Stars materialized in the holographic conference space, its crystalline features displaying deep concern. Doctor, our deep space monitoring stations report that the Devourer advance fleets have entered the outer rim of human space. We have perhaps 3 weeks before they reach our primary defensive positions. Elena, who had been promoted to Admiral and given command of the joint human-Zephyrian fleet, felt the familiar weight of impossible decisions settling on her shoulders. 3 weeks to test and deploy a completely experimental weapon against an enemy that had been unstoppable for 1,000,000 years. What's our confidence level on the virus? She asked. Dr. Chen hesitated, and Elena could sense her uncertainty through the psychic bond Alex had established. In laboratory conditions using captured Devourer biosamples, we've achieved a 97% success rate. The infected samples show restoration of individual consciousness and what appears to be genuine emotional responses. And the other 3%? Complete systemic failure. The test subjects essentially dissolved. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. They were talking about potentially committing genocide against an enemy that might still have the capacity for redemption. Alex's voice broke the silence, speaking from everywhere and nowhere as usual. You're all thinking about this wrong again, Elena sighed. Over the past months, she'd grown accustomed to Alex's habit of appearing at crucial moments with cryptic observations. How are we thinking about it wrong, Alex? You're treating this like a military operation with a technological solution. But the Devourers aren't really a military problem. They're a philosophical one. They represent what happens when a species chooses survival over everything else. You can't defeat that with weapons or viruses. Commander Crystalline Wind Through Stars shifted to display confusion. Then what do you suggest? Allow them to consume every species in the galaxy? I suggest you do what you've been doing all along. Choose to be better than they are. But I also suggest you let me help in a more direct way this time. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean by more direct? I mean I'm going to meet the Devourers personally. I'm going to do for them what I did for you. Create a bridge between what they are now and what they used to be. But unlike the revelation at Kepler 442, this bridge will be permanent. The implications hit Elena like a physical blow. Alex, you're talking about fundamentally altering the consciousness of an entire species. That's exactly what they did to themselves, but in reverse. The question is whether you trust me to do it right. Dr. Chen leaned forward. Alex, even if you could somehow restore their original nature, they have millions of ships and trillions of individuals. The sheer scale isn't the problem, Doctor. The problem is that I can't force them to choose redemption. I can only offer it to them. And if they refuse, if they prefer to remain what they've become, then you'll have to face them knowing that they had the opportunity to change and rejected it. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of every human and Zephyrian life depending on decisions being made in this sterile underground facility. When she opened them again, she could see her own determination reflected in the faces around her. What do you need from us? She asked. I need you to trust me, and I need you to be ready for any outcome. Some of the Devourers will choose redemption. Others won't. The galaxy is about to become a very complicated place. 3 days later, Elena stood on the bridge of the Joint Fleet flagship New Harmony, watching long-range sensors track the approaching Devourer fleets. The enemy formation was massive beyond comprehension, thousands of ships ranging from destroyers the size of cities to planet-killing dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything humanity or the Zephyrians had ever built. Admiral, reported Captain Torres, from the sensor station. We're detecting some kind of energy buildup from the lead Devourer ships. It's unlike anything in our databases. Elena nodded grimly. Intelligence reports suggested the Devourers had weapons that could sterilize entire solar systems. The combined human-Zephyrian fleet, impressive as it was, would last perhaps minutes against that level of firepower. Alex, she said quietly, if you're going to do something, now would be good. The response came not as words but as a sensation, a feeling of vast movement, as if something immense was stirring to life. On the main view screen, space itself seemed to ripple and bend. Then Alex appeared. But this wasn't the childlike figure they'd grown accustomed to. This was something that hurt to look at directly, a presence that seemed to exist in more dimensions than human eyes could process. Elena could make out familiar features, the young face, the simple clothes, but they were overlaid with something cosmic and terrible and beautiful. The Devourer fleet stopped. Every ship, from the smallest scouts to the massive world killers, simply hung motionless in space as if frozen in time. Elena could see on the tactical display that their power signatures were still active, but they'd ceased all forward motion. What's happening? Commander Crystalline Wind Through Stars asked, its voice tight with awe. Alex's response came not through the communication system but directly into their minds, carrying harmonics of meaning that no language could convey. I'm showing them what they used to be. I'm reminding them of who they chose to stop being. And I'm offering them the chance to choose again. Through the psychic bond, Elena could feel the overwhelming scale of what Alex was attempting. The child, no, the force that called itself Alex, was simultaneously communicating with trillions of individual Devourer minds, showing each one their species' history, their gradual transformation from explorers to destroyers, and the path back to what they had once been. For hours, both fleets hung suspended in space as an impossible conversation took place on a scale that spanned star systems. Elena watched the readouts, seeing power fluctuations in the Devourer ships that suggested massive internal activity. Then, slowly, some of the ships began to change. The sleek, predatory lines of Devourer vessels softened, their hull configurations shifting to reveal the aesthetically beautiful starships they had once been. Weapon systems retracted, replaced by what Elena's sensors identified as scientific instruments and communication arrays. But other ships remained unchanged, their dark hulls reflecting no light, their weapon systems still fully active. Alex's presence faded slightly, and when the child spoke again, there was exhaustion in the voice. The choice has been made. About 40% of them have chosen to remember who they used to be. The rest have decided they prefer what they've become. Elena stared at the tactical display, which now showed two distinct groups within the former Devourer fleet. The transformed ships were already moving away from their unchanged companions, creating distance that spoke of fundamental philosophical differences. What happens now? Elena asked. Now you discover whether the universe has room for both redemption and justice, Alex replied. The redeemed Devourers will need help rebuilding their civilization. The unchanged ones will continue their conquest. And all of you, humans, Zephyrians, and redeemed Devourers, will have to decide what kind of galaxy you want to live in. As if summoned by Alex's words, a transmission came through on a frequency that Elena's equipment shouldn't have been able to receive. The voice was layered with harmonics that suggested multiple speakers, and carried an accent unlike anything in human or Zephyrian languages. This is the collective consciousness of the restored Deep Explorers, formerly known as the Devourers. We remember now. We remember what we chose to forget. We are ashamed, and we wish to make amends. Elena looked at Commander Crystalline Wind Through Stars, seeing her own amazement reflected in the alien's crystalline features. This is Admiral Elena Vasquez of the Joint Fleet. You're welcome to try. 6 months after what historians now call the Great Awakening, the makeshift diplomatic station orbiting the neutron star Jaminga had become the strangest gathering place in galactic history. Representatives from 3 species that had been mortal enemies now worked together to address the most complex moral crisis any of them had ever faced. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood in the Central Council chamber, reviewing reports that would have been impossible to believe a year ago. The restored Deep Explorers had provided technological assistance that advanced human and Zephyrian science by centuries. Medical techniques that could regenerate entire organs, energy systems that tapped directly into stellar output, and most remarkably, historical archives containing the stories of hundreds of species that the Devourers had consumed over the millennia. But the unchanged Devourers, now calling themselves the Eternal Hunger, had not been idle. They had systematically destroyed 17 star systems in the Outer Rim, consuming every trace of life and converting the raw materials into more ships and weapons. Each victory made them stronger, and intelligence suggested they were preparing for a massive assault on the core worlds. The ethical implications are staggering, said Dr. Sarah Chen, who had become the lead coordinator for interspecies cooperation. We now have detailed records of civilizations that were completely erased from existence. The restored Deep Explorers are asking if we have any moral obligation to attempt to resurrect these dead species. Commander Crystalline Wind Through Stars, its crystalline features displaying deep contemplation, responded with careful consideration. My people understand the weight of redemption. We too destroyed civilizations in our flight from what we thought was inevitable doom, but bringing back the dead, that seems beyond the scope of justice or mercy. Elena found herself thinking about Alex, who had been absent for weeks. The child had simply vanished after the Great Awakening, leaving behind only a cryptic message that some choices can only be made by those who will live with the consequences. Before she could voice her concerns, a new presence entered the chamber. Elena turned to see a figure she didn't recognize, an elderly Deep Explorer, whose biomechanical modifications marked them as one of the restored consciousness. I am harmonic memory of stars, the being said, its voice carrying the complex tonal patterns characteristic of their species. I served as a data archivist before our fall, and I've been reviewing the historical records we preserved. I bring news that changes everything we thought we knew about this conflict. Elena gestured for the Deep Explorer to continue, noting how Commander Crystalline Wind Through Stars leaned forward with obvious interest. The species that became the Devourers was not the first to face this choice. Harmonic memory of stars continued. Our archives contain records of a cyclic pattern stretching back nearly 50 million years. Every few million years, the galaxy faces a crisis that forces its dominant species to choose between cooperation and consumption. Each time some choose cooperation and some choose consumption. Each time the consequences reshape galactic civilization. Dr. Chen's scientific mind immediately grasped the implications. You're saying this has happened before? Multiple times? At least 17 documented cycles. The pattern is always the same. A period of relative peace, the emergence of a consuming force, a great awakening that splits the consumers, and then a new equilibrium. What makes this cycle different is the presence of the entity you call Alex. Elena felt her blood run cold. Different how? In previous cycles, the splitting of the consuming force led to centuries of warfare between the two factions. The cooperative species eventually won, but only after massive casualties and the loss of countless civilizations. This time, someone is actively trying to prevent that war. As if summoned by the mention of their name, Alex's voice filled the chamber. But there was something different about it. Older, sadder, weighted with knowledge that Elena couldn't begin to comprehend. Hello, everyone. I'm sorry I've been away. I've been having a very long conversation with some old friends. Elena looked around the chamber, but Alex remained invisible. Alex, what did harmonic memory of stars mean about preventing a war? They meant that I'm not really a 12-year-old human child, Elena. I'm something much older. And this isn't the first time I've tried to shepherd a species through this particular crisis. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Elena felt the psychic bond carrying waves of shock and recognition from the other beings present. How many times have you done this? Dr. Chen asked quietly. This is my 18th attempt. The previous 17 cycles ended in war, even when I managed to split the consuming force. The cooperative species always won eventually, but the cost was unacceptable. Commander Crystalline Wind Through Stars stepped forward. What makes you think this time will be different? Because this time I found humanity. Elena blinked in confusion. What's special about humanity? Every species I've worked with before had one dominant trait. The Zephyrians valued honor. The Deep Explorers valued knowledge. The Antari valued harmony. But humans are contradictory. You're simultaneously the most violent and most peaceful species I've encountered. You can commit terrible atrocities and incredible acts of mercy within the same generation, sometimes within the same individual. Alex's presence seemed to grow stronger in the chamber, though the child remained unseen. That contradiction means you can understand both sides of this conflict in a way no other species can. You can relate to the Zephyrian drive for survival that led to conquest. You can understand the deep explorer curiosity that became consuming hunger, and you can see past both to find a third option. Elena felt pieces clicking into place in her mind. You're not trying to defeat the eternal hunger. You're trying to understand them well enough to offer them something better than victory. Exactly. The problem with previous cycles is that the cooperative species always tried to destroy the consuming force. But you can't destroy an idea, Elena. You can only replace it with a better one. Harmonic memory of stars shifted its biomechanical features to display what Elena had learned was curiosity. What kind of better idea could possibly appeal to beings that have chosen pure consumption over everything else? The idea that they're not really alive, Alex said simply. The eternal hunger has become so focused on consuming others that they've forgotten how to create anything themselves. They're essentially undead, animated by purpose but lacking any real existence. Dr. Chen leaned forward. You're going to offer them the chance to truly live again? I'm going to offer them the chance to become part of something larger than themselves, without destroying it in the process. The eternal hunger believes that consumption is the only way to achieve immortality. I'm going to show them that cooperation can achieve true eternity. Elena felt a chill as she realized what Alex was suggesting. You're going to integrate them into the galactic community, whether they want to be integrated or not. No, Elena. I'm going to give them a choice they've never had before. The option to contribute to something without first destroying it. Whether they take that choice is up to them. Alarms began sounding throughout the station as sensor operators detected massive energy signatures at the edge of the system. Elena rushed to the tactical display, watching in horrified fascination as hundreds of eternal hunger ships dropped out of hyperspace. They've found us, she said grimly. Yes, Alex replied, and for the first time in their acquaintance, Elena heard something like eagerness in the child's voice. And now we find out if the 18th time really is the charm. The lead eternal hunger ship, a massive construct that seemed to devour light itself, moved toward the station with predatory grace. When it transmitted, the voice that came through carried the harmonics of 1 million consumed civilizations. We have come to reclaim our wayward children and to feast upon those who corrupted them. Prepare for consumption. Alex's response echoed through space with a power that made reality itself seem to vibrate. I have a better offer. Prepare for resurrection. The final confrontation didn't begin with weapons fire or tactical maneuvers. It began with Alex materializing in the space between the diplomatic station and the Eternal Hunger Fleet. But this time the child's form was different than anyone had ever seen before. Admiral Elena Vasquez watched from the observation deck as Alex appeared not as a 12-year-old human, but as something that seemed to contain multitudes. The familiar features were there, but overlaid with the faces of countless other beings. Zephyrian crystal patterns, Deep Explorer biomechanical modifications, and forms from species that Elena didn't recognize. This is what I really am. Alex's voice carried across space to every ship and station in the system. I am the accumulated consciousness of every species that chose cooperation over consumption across the last 50 million years. I am their hope, their mercy, and their final gift to the galaxy. The lead Eternal Hunger ship, the massive dreadnought Infinite Appetite, responded with a transmission that carried the weight of eons of conquest. We know what you are, Ancient Guardian. We have consumed the records of 17 previous cycles. We know how this ends. With war, with suffering, with ultimate victory for those too weak to embrace necessity. Elena felt the psychic bond carrying waves of determination from the beings around her. Commander Crystalline Wind Through Stars stood at her side, its features displaying the complex patterns that indicated readiness for battle. Dr. Chen monitored the scientific instruments, tracking energy patterns that defied current understanding of physics. But Alex's response surprised everyone. You're right, that is how it has always ended before. But this time I'm not offering you war, I'm offering you life. The child, the ancient guardian, the collective consciousness of the cooperative, raised one small hand toward the Eternal Hunger Fleet. Instead of the destruction that everyone expected, something else began to happen. The dark hulls of the Eternal Hunger ships began to glow with soft light, as if illuminated from within. Elena watched in amazement as the predatory lines of the vessels started to shift, revealing the architectural beauty that lay hidden beneath millennia of modifications. What are you doing to us? The voice from Infinite Appetite carried confusion and something that might have been fear. I'm showing you what you've forgotten, Alex replied. Every ship in your fleet was once built by beings who valued beauty, knowledge, art, love. You've spent so long consuming others that you've forgotten how to create anything yourselves. You've become hollow. Through the tactical display, Elena could see that the transformation wasn't uniform. Some ships were glowing brighter, their forms shifting more dramatically. Others remained dark, their weapon systems still fully active. Harmonic Memory of Stars, monitoring from the Deep Explorer section of the station, provided commentary with growing excitement. The Guardian is not forcing change, it's offering memory. Each individual consciousness within the Eternal Hunger is being shown what their original species created, what they chose to abandon when they embraced consumption. The voice from Infinite Appetite changed, becoming less unified, carrying the harmonics of multiple speakers arguing among themselves. We remember the songs of crystal falls like rain, the mathematical poetry of the geometric dreamers, the living art of the symbiotic gardens. But these memories bring pain. It is easier to consume than to create, safer to destroy than to risk failure. Elena found herself stepping forward, though she knew her voice couldn't carry across space without technological assistance. Alex somehow amplified her words, letting them reach every being in the system. Pain means you're still alive, she said, thinking of her own species' long journey from barbarism to the stars. Humans know something about failure. We've destroyed our own planet's climate, fought wars over resources that should have been shared, committed acts that haunt us generations later, but we kept trying to be better. Commander Crystalline Wind Through Stars added its voice to hers. The Zephyrian Empire enslaved 47 species in our flight from you. We thought survival justified any action. We were wrong, and admitting that wrongness was the first step toward becoming worthy of survival. From the Deep Explorer section, dozens of voices joined in, speaking in their complex harmonic language about the shame of consumption and the difficult joy of restoration. But the most powerful voice came from an unexpected source. From within the Eternal Hunger Fleet itself, one ship began broadcasting on all frequencies. This is the consciousness collective of the vessel Devoured Light, formerly a Deep Explorer research ship. We remember now. We remember what we chose to forget when we joined the hunger. We remember our names, our individual thoughts, our capacity for wonder. Elena watched as the ship that had spoken broke formation with the rest of the Eternal Hunger Fleet, moving slowly toward the diplomatic station. Other ships began to follow, their dark hulls transforming into vessels of beauty and purpose. But approximately half the fleet remained unchanged, their weapon systems charging with energies that could sterilize solar systems. The voice from Infinite Appetite became singular again, cold and implacable. Enough, we reject your memories, your pain, your foolish hope. We choose the certainty of consumption over the uncertainty of creation. We are what we have chosen to become, and we will not be anything else. Alex's form began to change again, the overlaid faces of cooperative species fading until only the familiar 12-year-old remained. But the child's eyes held depths that spoke of cosmic responsibility. Then you force me to offer you one final choice, Alex said. You can continue as you are, consuming and destroying until the universe itself dies. Or you can face the consequences of every civilization you've consumed across the last 1,000,000 years. What consequences could possibly matter to us? Infinite Appetite responded with disdain. The consequence of judgment by your victims. The space around the unchanged Eternal Hunger ships began to shimmer, and forms began to appear, translucent at first, then gaining substance and reality. Elena gasped as she recognized what she was seeing. These were members of the species that the Devourers had consumed, somehow preserved within Alex's consciousness. Thousands of them, millions. Representatives of civilizations that had been erased from existence, now standing in judgment of their destroyers. The leader of the unchanged Eternal Hunger spoke for the first time with something approaching uncertainty. Impossible. The dead cannot return. One of the spectral figures, a being that seemed to be made of living music, responded with a voice like distant bells. We never left. We became part of the Guardian when our bodies were consumed, carrying forward the memory of our civilization's dreams. Another figure, crystalline like the Zephyrians but with different harmonic patterns, added its voice. You thought consumption was permanent, but consciousness cannot truly be destroyed, only transformed. Elena realized she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. The victims of the Devourer's conquest, preserved in the collective consciousness that called itself Alex, were being given the opportunity to confront their destroyers. But rather than demanding vengeance, the spectral beings began to speak of their civilization's achievements: art, music, philosophy, science. They spoke of love and hope and the simple joy of existence. They offered to share these memories with their former destroyers, to give them the chance to understand what they had destroyed. Some of the unchanged Eternal Hunger ships began to respond, their crews experiencing for the first time in millennia what it felt like to create rather than consume. These ships too began to transform, joining the growing fleet of redeemed vessels. But Infinite Appetite and perhaps a dozen other ships rejected even this final offer. Their leader's voice carried absolute finality. We choose consumption. We choose the certainty of ending over the uncertainty of beginning. If existence requires pain, we prefer non-existence. Alex nodded sadly. Then you have made your choice, and I will honor it. The child raised both hands, and the remaining unchanged ships simply faded from reality. Not destroyed, not consumed, they simply ceased to exist as if they had never been. Where did they go? Helena asked quietly. Nowhere, Alex replied. They chose non-existence, so I gave them exactly what they wanted. They are no longer a threat to anyone, including themselves. Helena looked around the system at the transformed ships, the redeemed crews, the spectral figures of resurrected civilizations. The greatest threat the galaxy had ever known had been ended not through violence, but through the simple offer of choice. What happens now? Dr. Chen asked. Alex smiled, and for the first time since Elena had known the child, the expression seemed genuinely youthful and hopeful. Now you build something better. Humans, Zephyrians, restored deep explorers, and the consciousness patterns of 1,000 extinct civilizations, all working together to create a galaxy based on cooperation rather than consumption. And you? Elena asked. What will you do? I'll watch and learn and hope that this time the cycle ends differently. That this time the galaxy chooses to grow instead of just survive. As Elena watched, Alex's form began to fade, becoming translucent like the resurrected civilizations. Remember, the child's voice carried across space one final time. Everyone saw a child, but no one,